Imagine being able to step into the fountain of youth and letting the water flush away all your wrinkles, ailments and sorrows, and then to emerge as a newborn being full of youthful energy. The longing for rest and recreation in the cradle of nature has been described as a longing for paradise. Maybe that sums up the very soul of the spa. The life-giving and healing powers of water as a drink and to bathe in are at the core of the spa therapy. Drinking water is a prerequisite for life. That's why the farmer always settled near the spring with good water. Some of the springs came to be perceived as health-giving, whose waters differed from ordinary water in terms of their taste, odor, or color. These springs were often the subject of mythical tales and stories about their supernatural qualities. It was said that drinking their water and offering a sacrifice to the spring could cure diseases and protect against evil. That's why many of these spa springs are referred to as sacrificial springs and can be found in more or less every parish in the province of Halland. Belief in the power of the springs is ingrained in folk culture across Europe. People used to gather around some of those springs in ancient days and build temple-like buildings to allow people to partake of the strengthening water, both as a beverage and for bathing in. On the continent, many of these springs are also thermal. They were the forerunners of the baths that later developed during the 17th and 18th century and served as a model for Swedish spas. Among the best-known examples are Spa in Belgium, Bath in England, Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic, Baden-Baden in Germany, and Vichy in France. In Bath, the hot springs of the Roman baths were used for around 400 years, but with the fall of the Roman Empire, they fell into decline and were forgotten. It wasn't until the 17th century that the well-to-do would resume their pilgrimages to Bath to drink the warm mineral-rich waters and bathe in the communal baths. They also started to demand better dwellings, more befitting of their status. The architect John Wood and his son designed these and other spectacular quarters in Bath, which clearly reflected the ideals of the 19th century and formed the backdrop for, among others, Jane Austen's novels. The city's architecture was to become something of a blueprint for many of Europe's spa resorts, and together with the restored Roman baths, Bath is today a magnet for tourists. However, in the 19th century, its popularity waned amidst competition from coastal resorts such as Brighton on the south coast. It was the competition from foreign spa resorts that spurred the growth of Sweden's spa centres. The oldest is Medevibrunn from 1678 with Dr. Urban Järna. He ordained set spa rituals with morning prayers, porridge, drinking water, visits to the toilet, walks, visits, concerts, horse and carriage outings in the local countryside, games, meals, as well as entertainment and dancing. Spa activities sprang up around some popular springs in Halland, since it was thought that the water from the spring had a healing effect on people. Sleeping accommodation, leisure, restaurants and clubhouses were built near the sites of the springs. The best-known historical spa centres in Halland are Varberg and Sara. Svartekällan in Appelviken near Varberg was bestowed with official health spa status in 1811 by the Swedish Health Collegiate. This was thanks to its iron-rich waters, which it was said could heal such things as melancholy and hypochondria, while even the hard of hearing could have their hearing restored if water was infused into the ears. Visitors were advised to drink 15 to 20 glasses a day. They walked to the spring in Appelviken from the centre of Varberg and drank its water using copper mugs that hung in the tree by the spring. It was to be imbibed briskly, standing up or preferably while walking. You can still see the foundations of the spring house that was built over the spring in 1817. Many guests came to feel that they couldn't manage the walk to the spring, and a horse and carriage was made available for them. The journey on the bumpy lanes was seen as beneficial, as it kept the stomach in movement after having drunk water. It was part of the spa therapy. In some cases, seesaws were provided for that purpose. Gradually, the guests grew even less inclined to exert themselves, and in 1837 the spring building was moved to Brunnsparken by the church in Varberg, with the water transported to the new site in barrels. The spring continued to be used right up to the 1880s. At the same time, buying bottled water grew in popularity. The chemists in Varberg mixed salt water with distilled water and added sodium sulfated iron oxide, labeling it Varberg's carbonated seawater with iron. Varberg developed both as a health spa and seaside resort, thanks to its coastal location. It attracted spa guests from across Sweden, as well as local folk from the country who'd been prescribed balneotherapy. Regular steamer services along the coast at the end of the 19th century between the important cities of Gothenburg and Malmö facilitated access to Varberg. The spas also attracted prominent guests such as authors and artists, which was just as important from the marketing point of view then as it is today. Nothing, however, could influence the status of a spa resort as much as visiting royalty. The Swedish monarchs Oscar I, Karl XV, Oscar II and Gustav V were guests at Särö, some even visiting Varberg, which meant a lot to these two local health resorts. Late in the 19th century, the works of what was known as the Varberg school of painters, Richard Berg, Niels Kröger and Carl Nordström, contributed to bringing the resorts to the attention of the rest of the country. Among the better-known cultural personalities that visited Varberg were the prominent literary figures Gustaf Fröding, Carl Snoilsky and Esaias Tegnér, who were there in the early 1820s seeking to cure their melancholy. However, a letter from Tegnér dated 1826 would indicate that the stay did little to help him.
For more than 14 days I have been salted like an archipelago herring. To start with, I bathed twice a day and drank their salt pimentas. After that I found myself in a not-so-well state. So I have now, like the others, limited myself to just one bath a day, without imbibing any water. However, despite that, I do not, alas, feel any better, but rather worse. Add to that the fact that Varberg is, without any shadow of a doubt, the most unsightly place in Sweden. It is Scandinavia's sandpit. Not a tree, not a shadow, not a speck of green as far as the eye can see. Just naked rock, salt water, and sand.
The lush green surroundings we see today were almost completely bare during the 19th century, as we see in these pictures of Appelviken and Jätterö from that period. In contrast to the spa guests, the local population was made up of relatively poor farmers or fisherfolk. Two worlds and two social classes would meet on the beach. The farmer, collecting seaweed to fertilize his fields, and chic society ladies, who'd later be making their way to the thermal bathhouse for seaweed massage. The health resort's activities were extended in 1823 with a thermal bathhouse in the harbour, and in 1848 a bathing pier was built for cold bathing. Two sea bathing houses were built during the latter part of the 19th century over the space of 20 years, but both were destroyed by storms. The cold bathhouse we see today was built in 1903 and underwent a change in 1950. It was renovated in 1997 and its original Moorish architecture from the previous century restored as a reminder of the highly refined Islamic bathing culture. The clubhouse and restaurant, with its distinctive timber facade, verandas and lounges, was inaugurated in 1886. Together with the new park, it would help to attract even more visitors to Varberg.
The thermal bathhouse is a large, handsome building built in the Gothic style. The resort's orchestra is playing on one of the two verandas. The entire veranda and the place outside is bestrewn with ladies, boisterous young children at play, as well as gentlemen in conversation. We saunter around, circulating from one to the other. heartily shaking hands with arriving strangers, flirting with the young ladies, or perhaps proceed to make arrangements for the evening's excursions on land or the sea. This is life at the resort in Petto.
The children's beach, with its wickerwork chairs and changing tent, was situated next to the bathhouse. It was mainly the children who bathed, while the adults strolled around and enjoyed the sea breeze. They wore hats and carried light umbrellas to ensure protection from the sun's rays. They strolled along the harbour jetty, around the fort, to the boathouse park, up to the spring park, and along the coastal promenade, all the way to the coastal sanatorium. Apart from its appealing situation, it was the skilled resort doctors that made the town well known. The most famous of them was Alfred Levertin, who, at the end of the 19th century, listed over 700 ailments that a visit to a health spa could heal. The treatment comprised drinking large quantities of water from the spring Svartekällan in Apelviken, both warm bathing in heated seawater, as well as cold sea bathing, massage, seaweed or mud treatment, a balanced diet, walks taken in the fresh, healthy sea air, and activities such as gymnastics, tennis or sailing. Much emphasis was placed on following the correct procedures when sea bathing. A brochure to promote the seaside resort from the early 19th century offered the following advice.
One should quickly and without interruption remove one's clothing. Then, without pausing or any hesitation, calmly step into the water. Immerse yourself to the point where you have covered your entire body with the salty water. Then proceed to stand upright. You should make sure that the water reaches up to your knees. After that, facing the beach, await the waves as they come rolling in. In the event of rough weather and stormy seas, to avoid the waves breaking over your head, you should proceed to jump just before the wave reaches you, in this manner letting it flow under you. However complicated this may sound, and however difficult it might seem, it is actually very simple. This will be confirmed at your first attempt.
A couple who stood out somewhat from the normal resort guests were the renowned artists Carl and Karin Larsson, who'd rented accommodation from a stonemason's widow in Apelviken in the summer of 1887. In a letter to his friend the author Gustav af Geijerstam, Carl Larsson included a drawing of himself naked on horseback, with Karin also naked on the water's edge, with the fort in the background.
Here on the western seas we are so well, bathing in the open sea, indecent.
Spas were not places that peasants and workers could afford to visit. For the working people in the cities, nude bathing gave them the opportunity to cool down after a warm summer day at work. Separate nude baths for men and women in Varberg were known to exist during the 1890s, but they probably date much further back. Young boys used to go and bathe naked on the cliffs south of the fort. This spot later became the men's nude baths. After that, a spot just north of here was designated for nude bathing for women. Those baths continue to be well-visited places today. Another activity that helped to put Varberg on the map was the coastal sanatorium in Apelviken. In contrast to the other local establishments, this place catered for the needs of deprived children whose deficient diet and hygiene rendered them prone to contracting tuberculosis. It was established by Dr. Johan Almer in 1902. A good diet, sunshine, bathing and gymnastics were part of the successful recipe applied by Dr. Almer. The disease was highly infectious, and the sanatoriums were often situated in relatively secluded surroundings, as was the case in Varberg. During the 1910s, the wooden pavilions were replaced by buildings in stone with new treatment premises, sun verandas, classrooms, baths, gym hall, operation room and playroom, the latter stemming from a new approach to education. By the 1920s, Apelviksgården had grown to become the largest care centre in the province, able to take in 547 patients. Appelviksgården's graveyard continues to be tended today. The sanatorium's founder is buried here, along with the children who died during their stay and whose families lacked the means to have their bodies transported home. The cemetery serves as a monument for the poverty that existed in Sweden during that era. Most of the coastal sanatorium's buildings have been taken over by a hotel offering extensive spa facilities. During the 20th century, Varberg grew in popularity as a seaside resort, with mixed bathing, with swimsuits of course. With employees gaining the right to paid holidays, improved transport by train, bus, car and bicycle, more and more people were able to travel to the seaside. Kiosks and restaurants, camping sites and summer cottages formed a backdrop to the bathing resorts. Visitors from near and far made for Varberg's beaches. Swimming competitions and events in the swimming stadium by the quarry also helped to enhance Varberg's reputation as a seaside resort. A marketing campaign during the 1970s achieved notability when it featured the resort's baths manager introducing nude bathing in Varberg on postcards, brochures and other publicity material. It had quite an impact. The resort also achieved nationwide fame when the former Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, Ingemund Bengtsson, himself from Varberg, was pictured with members of the cabinet clad in towels in the cold bathhouse. Varberg is unique insofar as it boasts an unbroken health resort tradition dating back to 1811. You can still bathe in the cold bathhouse built in 1903 and in the thermal bathhouse in use since 1925, where thermal treatment was developed, the beginnings of what we know today as spa.
You came in and it was like walking into the House of Health. There was so much healing in its walls because it had always been a health spa. We stood on either side of the guest and applied an oil massage. We followed each other so that it would feel as if it was just one person doing the massaging. There were more bath attendants in those days. They did oil and seaweed massage. That was basically what the health spas had to offer then.
Life at a health spa has changed from healing to bathing for pleasure and recreation. The hotels offer modern treatment and see to it that Varberg's reputation as a health spa is kept alive year-round.
You can say that all of Varberg is truly a spa town. I guess we have influenced each other. We all share the same common denominator. It is a privilege, and we're proud to work at the place where it all started. One activity has set its mark on the entire town. New branches have sprouted from it to form an entire industry, to such an extent that the town now calls itself Varberg, Sweden's health spa town. Just outside where we are, we pump water from the bay into our bathtubs. When you visit us, you're greeted by a person just like in the old days. Today, that person is a highly qualified massage therapist. In the early days, it might have been a bath attendant. However, it is in fact a meeting between people where manual power is exchanged.
Seaweed bathing or seaweed massage has taken place in Varberg since the beginning of the 19th century, using wooden bathtubs with heated seawater and with seaweed from the sea off Varberg. The seaweed has through the ages been harvested by fish farmers on the island of Jätterö. Bo Albrektsson is the modern-day equivalent of those fish farmers, helping to keep the old health resort traditions alive.
It used to be done using a sickle from a boat, but thanks to the suits available nowadays, it is much easier and quicker to wade into the water and take up the weeds by hand. There is brown algae and occasionally kelp. What I have here is a rack, which is used most commonly. We take it up as it is and then blanch it, which softens it and makes it thoroughly oily.
Something completely different based on ancient Asian traditions is on offer at the Stadshotel, where beneficial treatment is enjoyed above Varberg's rooftops and with a view of the fort.
The significance of water. You feel its cleansing powers. The water cascades over your head and you feel your worries dissolving. You feel clean and relieved of all your troubles.
The hotels offer treatment all year round. In summer, the main attraction is, of course, the variety of bathing Varberg's sandy beaches and rocky coastline offers. The town's close proximity to the sea, seaside promenade, nude bathing and the well-preserved health spa environment are some of the reasons why Varberg continues to hold its own as one of Sweden's most popular seaside and health spa resorts in the 21st century. The cold bathhouse tells of a bygone era, while the scantily clothed visitors on the jetty today tell of another. During the summer, Halland's coastline becomes almost literally Sweden's bathtub. However, activities there are no longer just confined to bathing. Today, Varberg is also known for its windsurfing, which can be practiced, weather permitting, almost all year round. When you see the surfers take off and float above the breakers in Appelviken, the instructions on how to carefully dip oneself in the waves from a century ago seem far away. A new age brings new cures. However, if health spas in their early days appealed to people who longed for paradise, perhaps we could say that today's desire for bathing in all its forms is an expression for our longing for the Garden of Eden, where the waves and the healing powers of water offer eternity.